see, make sure everything comes through. Make sure the stream comes through. Uh-oh, looks like we're getting a stream. Hey, looky there. We'll see what comes up here in just a minute. We hope everybody's doing good tonight. Jess and I got new microphone stands, just so everybody knows. We were banging into the other ones, and they had these springs inside of them. And you would be like, these things, you would hit them, like they would have these springs, and when you'd hit them inside of our headphones, it was like ridiculous. The sound they would make, it was pretty funny. So I got ones that are supposedly a little bit more quiet, we hope, right?
Yeah, we hope.
Yeah, we hope. Yeah, we're going to find out tonight. They move pretty smoothly, though. It's pretty fancy stuff.
We're fancy now.
We're something. Anyway.
Almost as fancy as your technology on Sunday, right?
No, there's nothing as fancy as my technology on Sunday. I mean, that's like rolling large. There's not many people that can pull that one off. I can pull that off. Yeah, that's true. Because I'm old. I can do that. So that's a good thing. So tonight, we got a special treat for you really tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit more. Jess and I were having some discussions, and she's like, Dad, I think you're talking too much. She's right. And that's not the purpose of what we're trying to do. This is to help all of us study together. So tonight we're going to approach this study time a little bit differently. We're going to be talking about Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and Song of Songs that Solomon wrote. Jesse's got a list of questions that we're going to be talking about. I got some points I'd like to make. We're going to have this like overall discussion. And if you want to join the discussion, you can ship us something through on Facebook. Or if you happen to be on our YouTube channel, you can, ship us through a question. We'll do our best to answer those questions. But Jess and I both decided, like, getting through the first part of the Bible, there's so much going on in there.
Yeah.
And I got to answer these questions and stuff. And Jess is, like, trying to learn also at the same time. So what we're going to do is we've agreed that we're going to kind of flip this a little bit. And we're going to talk, like, about first impressions, like Jess's first impressions of like as she's reading stuff, and we're going to have some more time of discussion. That's what we're going to try to do. So I'm looking forward to tonight. Hey, John, how you doing? And you got anybody on yours?
Not yet.
I'm more popular than you.
That's
Go
true.
to the old guy. Yay. That's awesome. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit more open discussion because it's easy for me to like have a single point of view or something like that, and that's my job is to teach. But that doesn't really help a lot of people learn, especially if you're like reading this for the very first time or looking at it. There's a lot going on. So we're going to try we're going to try to do a little bit more to fill that in tonight. So with that said, I want to go ahead and did you get a comment?
True Anna. Hi, True Anna.
Hi, True. So we're glad you're here tonight. We're glad everybody's here tonight. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and pray. Jess and I are going to talk a little bit about a few things. I got an icebreaker question. My turn tonight. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a car-related question, so it's good. So that's where we're at. So anyhow, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to get started. So let's go ahead and pray. God, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for this opportunity that we have to be here. Just help us to be engaging, really, because that's what this whole study is about. It's not just about, rehashing a sermon or preparing for the next one. It's about learning, and that's what we want to do. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for my daughter being here with me tonight. Thank you for your church. Thank you for the good that she's doing in the community. So let us continue to do that, God. We just praise you for your mercy and your grace. Watch over us now as we go through this next hour. And again, thank you for those that are joining us. And if they have questions, let us do our best to answer those. And we pray these things in the most beautiful name, the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. So last week, Jess asked me a question about what was it? Would I rather be a mechanic? What was it about the ark?
Would you rather name the animals or build the ark?
And I said build the ark, obviously. So I said to her, because this is something that happened in her life, would you rather have a Dodge Challenger or a Toyota RAV4? Oh, go ahead. Tell them what happened.
Well, I had a Challenger.
Thank you. And Dad went down and picked it out, and I really worked hard to get a good deal on it for her. It was awesome. She was cool. And then one day, she went to the dark side.
Only because I needed more room.
That's what she said, okay? And she needed better gas mileage. I'm like, seriously, where do you ever go? And so she traded my Dodge Challenger in, and she got a Toyota RAV4, right?
Oh, it's always in eco mode, so it's very slow.
Yeah, it's very, very slow. And I had to remind her that. And the Challenger, I said, you had like 300 horsepower. It was a little V6. It was
good, though.
It was peppy. Then she got in the RAV4 and had like 81.
I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, and I told her, I said, now you got to think about passing cars and all this, and you got to figure out See, now we just need to work on something else.
Yeah, maybe I have to get a new car again.
Yeah, she used to tell everybody, she used to introduce her Challenger as the baby.
Yeah, the baby demon.
Yeah, the baby demon, because it had a V6 in it and didn't have the 6.4 liter. It was pretty funny. That car was pretty cool, though.
It sure was.
It was fun. It was great. We got that car. Barry was our car salesman.
Barry will never forget you.
Yeah, Barry liked me and just couldn't figure that out. And she said, Dad, I'm the one paying for the car, and he likes you. Why is that? I'm just cool. That's all. But anyhow, so we're glad you joined us tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about Solomon. So, Jess, give me your impressions of Solomon so far.
Of the books or just him?
Just overall, just what do you think?
I think he tried to do the right thing, but then he got so smart, he tried to outsmart God and forgot where his wisdom came from. And then he did his own thing, and then he was never happy with it, so then he became very bitter.
Okay. What do you think, like, in between, like, if we were speculating, which we are, like, in between all of that, what do you suppose, like, do you think it's possible, like, his wisdom, like, worked against him?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, you can tell by kind of Ecclesiastes, like what you said, he's just so bitter and angry in it because he feels like he's achieved everything and there's nothing left to achieve.
Right.
Kind of like that. That's how people get when they feel like they've reached the end of whatever.
Angry.
Their goals, yeah.
And I want to add to that a little bit. One of the things that fascinates me, and I guess it's fascinating sort of in a melancholy way, I guess, is what you would say. It's kind of ironic that Solomon's intelligence caused him the grief that it caused him. You would think if you were sort of that smart, and then you would want to, like, contribute back.
Yeah. I guess you could have gone two ways.
Yeah.
Contribute back and realize what you have, or get bitter.
Yeah.
Right?
And he chose bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you say? She has a little corgi named Gimme G. And he's great, by the way. But she knows his moods when he wakes up.
Oh, yes.
And what do you say? He chose violence today.
He chooses violence some days, and you just have to understand that.
Yeah, you just have to deal with it. He chooses violence, she says, Dad. He chose violence. So Solomon kind of chose bitter.
He did.
Yeah, he kind of chose.
But he never came out of it, it seems,
he stayed there.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that, like, I can understand that for a period of time, maybe, right?
Right.
Like, everybody has these things you go through in life, but he just didn't seem to come out of that.
Mm-mm.
And he seemed to really stay there. And then this week, we're going to be looking, it's kind of funny, there's this book in the Bible called Song of Songs, and we're going to be looking at it this week. And it's like one of the most beautiful books written about love, like really 8 chapters of just amazing, just I don't want to call it husband and wife, I'll call it male and female, so to speak. And we can call it husband and wife, we can call it all of that. But there's been so much about the Song of Songs. Jess and I were talking, like, she read some of it was like this relational between a husband and wife, and some of it's all, some people write it as a relationship with God. Some people, they won't even teach on it. They're, like, so embarrassed to, like, teach on it. And I'm like, why? It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But it's interesting because you go from Proverbs to Ecclesiastes to Song of Songs. Now, I can't tell you if they're written, like, in that order, but it would appear like in Solomon's life, like, you would think that, like, Proverbs was obviously first, and I would kind of have speculated that maybe Song of Songs was second, like the way that he wrote, and then Ecclesiastes was his last writings. But that's, like, honestly, when you read these, that's like an emotional whirlwind.
Yeah, it sure is.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, like you go to Proverbs and you see this, like, super intellectual, like, I'm in control, whatever it is, however we say that, right? Then you get to Ecclesiastes and it's like, I lost control, right? And then you get the Song of Songs, and it's like, I ain't got no control. Whew.
Yeah.
Quite amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? And that was Solomon and what was going on in his life. And I'm not bashing Solomon, right? And Jess and I were talking a little bit, which was kind of cool. And she had this, like, we were talking about this viewpoint. And she's like, Dad, we look at these books in Scripture, like there's 3 from Solomon. Like we got Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. How did they land in the Bible, right? Like, we could get Proverbs.
Yeah.
I mean, you could understand, Proverbs is like this godly wisdom, and we're good with that, right? Then you get to Ecclesiastes, and it's like,
I didn't even know. I had to ask you, I think, if they were both written by Solomon.
Yeah.
I just was like, what in the world is going on?
Thank you. And then you get the Song of Songs, and it's like, this is very interesting, right? And so you have this, like, when you're reading the Bible, and sometimes you get to these books, sometimes, right? Like we talk about, hey, if you haven't read this stuff, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? But Jess and I talk about that every week, right? We're okay with that. Sometimes you're reading it for the first time.
That's me.
Thank you. Right? And like Jess even mentioned when we started, she read bits and pieces of the Bible. But these are not books that you go to read. Like it's not, hey, I'm going to go read, Ecclesiastes today. Cheer me up, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm feeling a little down. I'm going to read Ecclesiastes. No, that ain't working. Right? So we see this when what we're doing there. And when you get to like Solomon's life, and we're going to try to figure this out together. Okay, so let's compare him to David.
Okay.
His dad. Okay. David, like, I want to be careful how I say this, but I got to say it because it's like with Solomon, and I've said this openly. I've studied Solomon a lot, like, and I don't say that lightly. Like, I've read Solomon and studied Solomon, and I quit reading commentaries and viewpoints about Solomon and kind of pushed those to the side, and I started like looking at like what he wrote myself, right? When we look at David and we realize what David, like when he was writing the Psalms, like he seemed to have this purpose. Like if he was in some kind of trouble with God, right? He wrote Psalms that reflected his contriteness.
Right.
Right? Like he was seeking to get back in God's favor. If he felt strongly that God was with him, he would write that way, or if he was going into battle, he wrote Psalms that reflected where he was, right? And so that kind of gives you this, okay, that's what David did. Okay. Now, contrast that to Solomon. It's almost like Solomon was so smart, in my opinion, in studying Solomon. He was so smart that he never was like taking his own advice. Like he didn't have his purpose in his mind was he was supposed to be so smart he was telling everybody else what to do. Like, and he wasn't heeding his own, he was writing, how do they say that is? Is that third person? Like when you're talking to everybody else but you?
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
I think so,
is that third person? Okay. So that's kind of like Solomon. Like, like the even Proverbs, like he's telling, you do this way, you do that, you do this. And you see that. And it's almost like Solomon got to a point, in my opinion, like when he was writing, how he was writing, that it was like he wasn't listening to himself. Like his advice was for everybody else. Do what I say and not what I do. That's kind of what he was doing. I mean, it would be very hard for me to think that Solomon, and I'm careful how I say this because I don't take this stuff lightly when I say it. It would seem to me that like Solomon had to have suffered like from anxiety somewhat, because he was telling people one thing, but he was out searching the world for other things. And to me that would be a hard place to be. Like, and living your life that way on this journey of exploration. I mean, that would be difficult. And then it'd be like being like the world's greatest cook, right? Now think about this. I mean, seriously, bring this into real life. Okay, you're the world's greatest cook, and secretly you're eating at McDonald's.
That's embarrassing.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you just like, you can make all these dishes, and all you ever do is tell people how to cook, and this is what you do, and it's like you write the cookbooks, and every time somebody asks you a question, they got a recipe they need to know, and you got the recipes, and you get so like tired of that, you're like, you go to McDonald's because you don't cook for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So you go down, maybe you make yourself feel good. I know this is a bad example, but okay. You go down and you order a Happy Meal, right? Because you want to see what the toy is.
Of course.
Right? So you get that, right? But then you go down the other time and maybe you want a double quarter pounder or, whatever it is. And yet you're not letting anyone know that's what you're doing. And everybody's figuring, well, you eat like the best food and the best of everything because, well, you write all these cookbooks. And then they find out, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but then you get sick one day and they find out you have heart disease or you're obese because you've been eating at McDonald's and not eating healthy.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. I think that's what Solomon... I don't think they had McDonald's in Jerusalem back in the day of Solomon. They might have them there now, but back in the day, right? They have that. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think after we kind of compared you compared David and Solomon, it seems like they're both very emotional.
Yes.
But kind of in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
David's like emotional towards himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Solomon is just, I don't know, how do I say it? Emotional, but not with his feelings. He's just kind of emotional to be emotional, maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to say it. I'm trying to think. Like what you said, he wants to tell everybody everything, but not take it himself.
Narcissistic.
Maybe a little bit, because he thinks he's so smart or something.
Okay.
He can get whatever he wants.
Right.
Because he's so smart. He has all these wives and concubines and these people who, they kind of worship him instead of God.
Right.
So maybe that's where he fell short from, too. Maybe it made him just think too highly of himself.
Oh, boy. Now, I do want to clear one thing up. My wife had a question she said when I was talking about this, and this is on me, and I needed to clarify. When I mentioned the 700 wives and the 300 concubines, she thought the concubines were like a place to stay. She didn't realize they were like prostitutes or like that they were just property. It's kind of what she didn't realize those were people when we mentioned that. And she thought it was part of like his possessions or belongings or whatever it is. So in other words, what Jess was saying, like 1,000 women around Solomon, and Solomon basically, to me, became sort of this controlling person, right? Like he thought he was in control anyway, only to discover not so much. He's the kind of guy that would be driving down the road, right, and shut the GPS off.
Then get lost.
Right? Seriously, when you think about it, right? That's Solomon. Like you're driving down the road, hey, by the way, right? Like, I don't need no GPS. And then never admit that he was lost.
Right.
Right? And then run out of gas or something like that while he was driving. You wouldn't do that in econo mode in a RAV4.
No, you sure won't.
You might do that in a Challenger.
But you will not lose your gas.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, hey, truth of the matter is you'd look better getting lost in a Challenger. I mean,
That's true.
So I'm just saying.
But don't go on any gravel roads or anything in the Challenger.
Like do burnouts. Yeah.
You could do that, though.
See, that's awesome. So if we had this life of Solomon and we were studying this life of Solomon, there's these things that I want to talk a little bit about. Jessica just mentioned, like, David was emotional, sort of, would you say to himself, kind of, sort of?
With like his feelings
His feelings,
stuff.
okay. Yeah. And then Solomon, on the other hand, was sort of what I would consider more of a controlling emotion of others. Like, as long as he was in control, he was okay. Yes. That was kind of the emotion he had. And we would see that. So we think about something that I think is very important. It kind of gives us a clue to Solomon, okay? Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. They couldn't be 3 more different books. I mean, you would think 3 different people, maybe even more than 3 different people wrote those books, right?
I did.
Yeah. And the extent of, like, they go from here to here, and it's like there's everything in between. And it's just, like, that gives me, like, when I look at that, it gives you this idea of, like, what's the deal with Solomon? Like, what's going on in that guy's life that creates all of everything going on? Like,
right.
All these different, we're talking about his emotions. And I can't imagine the gamut of emotions that guy ran on a daily basis. If he was, we learned in Ecclesiastes, whatever his eyes saw,
Yeah.
I never denied myself.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you come up with that thought process. Like, you think about, like, the energy that he expended just trying to figure out what he was going to do next.
Yeah.
You know, to keep himself satisfied or happy or whatever it is. And I just can't, waking up out of bed and just thinking to yourself, oh, by the way, right, I'm just going to go do this today. Whew. That's like bizarro.
Yeah.
I mean, I said this on Sunday, and I do want to talk a little bit about that. If you don't have any structure in your life, you know, and Solomon obviously, he must not have had, okay, it has to lead to frustration. Like, you don't, Jessica and I have a good friend that was in the military, and he's pretty funny. He's a little gruff, but he's pretty funny. I'm not going to mention him by name, but he's pretty funny, right? Okay. And he always talked about, like, the thing that he loved about the military and what he did was the structure. Like, he had a goal, he made the goal, he did these things, and every day that's what he would do. And his life became that way. And, like, they call that stacking it. And you get up in the morning, okay, you've achieved that. You get out of bed, that's another positive. You know, you get yourself ready, that's another positive. Whatever it is. And you keep stacking those positives. And pretty soon you have a whole stack of positives because you have structure. But if you didn't have that structure, how would you ever gauge where you were? Like, you could never set a goal.
That's a good point.
Right? Like, you wouldn't have any idea where to go. Like, there would be no goals. I mean, because you wouldn't even know if you achieved a goal, other than the fact you woke up and looked out and went, I'll go do that.
Yeah.
Right? You'd go and do that. And then, like, it's just amazing to me to think about. Like, and now I kind of get why, you know, Solomon kept saying meaningless a lot. You know, a chasing of the wind in Ecclesiastes is meaningless. It's meaningless. You know, it's just a chasing of the wind because there was no structure. There was no, like, way for him to gauge if he was successful or not because, you know, everything seemed to be success to him. And so you think about that and what that would mean, like, in your own life. You know, what about okay, all right. I'm going to catch Jessica a little off guard here. Okay. Why do you like yoga?
Because I wasn't very flexible before. I'm still not super flexible, but it's a good way to exercise, which was my goal. And it really clears your mind because it's more breathing than anything. So I like to be able to kind of challenge myself with the poses and then get some stress and tension out.
Right. Okay. But when you do it, you put it on, right? And you have, like, this goal of accomplishing the moves.
Yes.
Right? Okay. By the way, I can't do this. She just laughs. I try to do it. And, like, if I get to the floor, well, the law of physics takes over, and that's kind of...
No, the law of rumble, you mean?
Yeah, the law of rumble. My basset comes over and sits on me. So.
And he's 80 pounds, so good luck.
Yeah, you ain't moving him. Yeah, you ain't moving him. But you think about, like, when you do your yoga and you're doing it, there, you know, you do the goal of being able to hold the pose or whatever it is. Well, you could imagine if, you know, you just say, well, I can do that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm done. And it's all good, right? But there's a satisfaction in knowing that there's been a difficulty. And there's a satisfaction in knowing you've overcome that difficulty, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I mean, I think that's awesome to think about. You know, I think it was last week we were talking about the fact that, like, and I'm just an example. You talk to somebody that overcomes an addiction, and, like, they know the day and the time that they overcame that. Like, they can tell you the date, and they can tell you the time, whatever that was, when they overcame that, and how many years it's been, right? That's a moment in their life that, like, that was an intestinal fortitude they did not think they had, and they proved they did. That is stinking awesome, by the way, right?
Sure is.
Yeah. And you think about that in life, that you've overcome that, you know, and that's kind of like, for me, like with Solomon, he evidently didn't have that. You know, like, he didn't really have to overcome anything. It was just already, like, done.
Yeah, I guess that would be annoying if you're, like, so wise, everything's just given to you. It's probably great at first, but then after time, it's like, hey, like what you said,
Yeah.
can I do anything else?
Right.
Or like,
and then, and everybody expecting you to be wise all the time, the pressure of that, and trying to have the right answer all the time. There's probably a reason Einstein looked the way he did, huh?
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was so smart. Everybody expected he had
Frazzled.
frazzled all the time, trying to figure stuff out, running those math problems in his head. Whew, that's something. But we see, again, we talk about Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, and the difference in the three, like where Solomon must have found himself inside of his own life, and how like he was further and further and further away from God, and closer and closer and closer constantly to being unsatisfied.
Okay, I got a crazy question.
I hope I have an answer.
Do you think God knew that would happen when he gave him wisdom? Because God, knows everything. I know we have free
Amen.
will, but
Amen to
do you
that.
think he saw that outcome for Solomon? Because that's pretty sad.
I think that God knew the risk. Okay, let me answer it this way first. I'm going to answer it this way first because I don't want to make an off-the-cuff answer. Okay, let's go all the way back to creation when God made Adam and Eve, right? Like, God kind of knew there was going to be problems, okay? And there were, right? Like, God kind of got it, kind of knew it was going to happen, and it did, right? But he always had a backup plan. You ever notice that? Like, there was always this plan in place that God had the next plan in place, okay? I believe that it's quite unique that God did not give Solomon wisdom until Solomon asked for it. It wasn't like Solomon was like, hey, I'm really smart, right?
Right.
God did not do that. God gave Solomon wisdom to lead the people. Remember? That's from the book of Kings, okay? Because Solomon went in to pray, right? Solomon's like, hey, I don't want a lot of money. I don't want a lot of wealth. I don't need power. I just need to figure out how to have a wise and discerning heart to lead your people. And God was like, well, since you didn't ask for wealth and didn't ask for power, I'm going to give you that. God gave him a wise and discerning heart. Then Solomon ran with the ball after that. Okay? And started using his wealth of knowledge for the wrong things. And his wealth of knowledge became his pride. And pretty soon, like we read on Sunday in Ecclesiastes, better a wise young youth, a foolish youth, right? Than an old king who won't heed a warning. A foolish old king, right? So I think that's a great question. And I think that God gives us gifts. And I think that we have those gifts and those abilities. But what we do with them in our free will thinking, that's a completely different, it's easy to, I'm careful, okay? Because I don't want to make an off-the-cuff remark, but I'm going to be careful because this is pretty important. What we do with the gift, God gives us free will thinking, and in my heart, I'll be very careful, I don't believe he controls that. That's our decision. That's our choice. Like, he gives us that gift, and then what we do with it. Being a pastor is not the easiest thing in the world. It's not, okay? But here's the reality of what you do with being a pastor and the choices that you make as a pastor. Are they the best thing for God, or are they the best thing for you? And that's what Solomon kind of took himself out of that equation. You mentioned his emotion and the different things, like he was saying things to say things and stuff, but he couldn't seem to follow his own advice. Well, there's a why, because he kept taking God out of it. And every decision that he was making became more and more ungodly, anti-God, pro-Solomon.
And you can see that.
Gracious, listen, if you're ever in that part of your life where you think that somehow, right, that you're that smart, read Solomon, you'll learn very quickly you ain't. or you shouldn't be thinking that you are, because none of us have all the answers. It's not an easy thing to do. It just doesn't work that way. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, like, what time is it anyway? I don't want to.
7:30. But Shar says hi, and then she said that's one way our faith comes into play.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And Ryan Addy joined us. Hey, Ryan. And I think when we look at the book of Proverbs, the book of Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, and we see these different stages, it kind of gives us an insight into Solomon's, like, struggle. I'll be careful how I say that. Proverbs is pretty solid. That's like right there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty solid advice. Ecclesiastes, I don't think that's good advice, right?
You don't think so?
No, I'm skeptical. Like, some of it's like, okay, but the rest of it kind of makes me nervous. But then we get to Song of Songs, like this love story, right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because Jess was talking to me before we came on. What were you saying? You'd read about it, and some people think it's a relationship with God, and some think it's a relationship between a man and a wife, and that's how it is. And there's been books written about Song of Songs that talk about it's how you pray through the Song of Songs, and there's been other books. Like, I preached on Song of Songs here about men writing a love letter to their wives, and then wives writing back to their husbands. Your mom and I talked about Song of Songs during our marriage stuff, and the importance of Song of Songs, the Song of Songs, and where it is and why it is. It is, Song of Songs is a writing of pure love. That's what it is. Okay, it's two people that they love each other, they're infatuated with each other, they care about each other, and they go to great lengths to be with each other. And when you read Song of Songs carefully and you look at it, you'll notice that in the writings, like, it'll say she, when you read it, talks about the watchman finding her and holding her back from her lover, okay? The obstacles that we have in life, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about a married couple, okay? The obstacles in marriage, that sometimes work is an obstacle. You have to work, but it's still an obstacle because you're tired, right? And it's hard, but you still have to work to pay bills. We all know that, right? Cuts into your time being together, whatever the case may be, but you still care about each other. You still love one another, right? Okay? People would tell you use the word sappy.
I sure do.
You use the word sappy. Oh, that's sappy, she says. She uses that word. But it's how they talk to each other and what they want from each other. And then in the end, when you read it, they don't want to be separated. Like, they want to be together. And I think that's the beautiful thing. Now, let's think about the Song of Songs. Okay. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Songs. Proverbs is God-focused. Ecclesiastes is Solomon-focused. Song of Songs is in a relationship-focused. You see how it goes? Now, what does that tell you about Solomon? Think real hard about what it would tell you about Solomon. He really struggling to figure out life, right? Because he, like, had a relationship with God, then he, like, abandoned sort of God, if you will, and he went to Ecclesiastes, and he was doing that, and then suddenly he tries to replace that loneliness with, right? Okay, so now he's found this woman, and, right? Okay, and this is what's going to give him this great satisfaction. That didn't work out so well. Because evidently he had to write Song of Songs 700 times.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
You know what I'm just saying?
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? So that gives you the glimpse into what his struggle in life was when you think about it. And, Jen's on here. Hold on.
She says, I love sappy.
Yay! Okay.
That's why she likes her Christmas movies.
Yeah, there you go. I thought that's what she said. But we see this in Solomon's life. And we see what happens with Solomon. And now you have 3 distinct characterizations of this man at 3 distinct stages in his life. And we learn at the end of Ecclesiastes, the only thing that really he should have been doing is to fear God and obey his commands. I mean, I don't think, honestly, I'll be careful how I say this again, because I don't want to make an off-the-cuff comment about something. But you would have thought, as wise as Solomon was, he would have figured that out a little sooner.
I guess that's fair.
You know what I'm just saying? You know what I mean? Like, he would have went, that's probably not a good idea. You know, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I don't really think I have to indulge this much. Maybe, wait a minute. Let me go back and let me back up here a little bit, right? Let me put this train in reverse. But he doesn't seem to do that. Mm-mm. And again, when you read Proverbs and you read Ecclesiastes and you read Song of Songs and you put the 3 of them together, you really get a glimpse of just the emotional paradox that Solomon was. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'll be, again, I cannot imagine trying to be around him.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it was in Proverbs when you'd be around him.
Maybe. I don't know.
Right?
But I hope. But by the time he made it to Ecclesiastes, and even in Song of Songs, I mean, he struggled, basically trying to find his footing. Now, that does tell me, we go back, we're not told much about his mama, Bathsheba. We're not told much about her. David, we're told a lot about, right? But you could see where Solomon would be so emotional from. David. Like you even mentioned the Psalms, like David wrote these emotional Psalms crying out, like he begged God not to be mad at him. Mm-hmm. He begged God to, show him favor. He asked God for guidance, all these different things, right? And we know that. Okay, so David was very emotional that way. Well, Solomon, thinking about this, Solomon was emotional but smart. I'm not saying you can't be emotional without smarts, but what I'm saying is really smart.
Yeah.
Now, why do I tell you that? Because you can imagine David is writing from his heart. Because he says he's a man after God's own heart, right? And God even told Samuel, I ain't looking at his outside. I'm looking at his heart. Samuel was the prophet that anointed David king. Okay, we go all the way back. We know that. Now, let's go to Solomon. Writing out something, okay, whatever it is, then looks at it. Why did I write that? I mean, is that really good advice? I don't know if I really feel that way. Correct? So now he has to think about this analytical mind of his, that he's got to analyze everything and go through it. All right? Now, then we get to Song of Songs, or we'll say Ecclesiastes even, and we see the bitterness. So we go from Proverbs, which is practical, right? We go to Ecclesiastes, which is bitter. And then we get to Song of Songs, which is like, woo, right? We see all of that. Mm-hmm. Whew. I mean, that's a lot going on.
It sure is.
Yeah, that's a daily thing. It's no wonder the man wrote 3,000 Proverbs and like 1,000 songs, right? Like I can't imagine, like, he must have written enough. He'd be like a library of information.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
You know what I mean? Like, he must have been a library of information. And that's a lot to keep in mind when you're trying to do that. And again, be the king. You know what I mean? Like, people must have been like knocking at his door constantly.
I'm sure.
And I've often thought, like with Solomon, like we read Solomon's story and people came from miles and they brought these lavish gifts, right? And I'm going to go back, like Jess and I have talked about this numerous times, but Solomon's worth talking about. Like we go back that silver was worthless in the kingdom because he had so much gold that silver was considered worthless. And all these people were bringing him the finest gifts. to have audience with him, right? That's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just for his advice. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. You think it got to him?
Oh,
if you were that wise, I mean.
I'm thinking it. I mean, to be that smart, and imagine, just okay. And I'll be, again. Just imagine the fear of failure inside of that. That somehow, regardless of how smart you are, regardless of what happened, at some point you would be afraid you failed, or the self-doubt that you would have. Especially, okay, we'll go back to what Solomon asked for. He asked God for wisdom to lead God's people. Those foreign kings and foreign dignitaries and all those people, those weren't God, that wasn't who Solomon was in charge of. He was not charged to lead those people. Okay, those were not God's, and I don't want that to come out wrong. Again, listen carefully to what I'm saying, okay? Solomon was the king of Israel and Jerusalem, so to speak. Okay, he was not the king of all these other providences that came to see him, okay? He was to set a godly example for them, but he was not the king of those people. So when he was trying to deal with those people, okay, and however he was dealing with those people, that was not necessarily what we would call God's wisdom to better God's people. Now Solomon is putting a lot of pressure on himself. Now, here's where we get even further into this. They don't call it God's temple.
I call it Solomon's temple.
Bingo.
He must have had a big old head.
I'm just telling you, that's what you hear him say that because that's what they talk about, the Solomon's temple, right? And you know what else they call it later on in the time of Jesus? Herod's temple. That ain't the house of worship, right? That's not the Lord's house. It's not the Lord's temple, right? Solomon's temple? We'll start calling it Harold's church. What do you think? That's it. Just be that Harold, he's just amazing. That's it. That's I can't imagine, stuff like that happening when we think about it. But the pressure of always trying to have these answers, the pressure of being under the microscope all the time, the pressure of knowing that you have all these other kings that are coming to see you. What do you suppose? Let's talk about a little bit. We're gonna speculate a bit. In fun, you guys can chime in on this too if you want. You want to chime in on this a little bit. What do you suppose an average day for Solomon looked like?
Let me get a sip first here.
I mean, an average day for Solomon.
Well, we decided there's no structure, right? He just goes and gets what he wants.
Yep, there's no structure.
So he's waking up. He's going to get breakfast whenever and wherever he wants.
Okay.
Probably not at McDonald's, though, right?
No, there's no McDonald's yet.
No McDonald's yet. So he's got to get something to eat, and I'm sure he's got like a chef or something.
Oh, sure. I'm sure.
Why wouldn't you, right?
Right, exactly.
Like with Nehemiah was the cupbearer, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure he's got a poison taster and cupbearer.
Mm-hmm.
So he's making sure his food is good.
Right.
And then after that, I guess go find one of your wives or his concubine. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, right?
You're right. And then maybe it's time for lunch again after that.
Yeah, and then he's got to meet with the dignitary.
Probably, yeah. You got to make time for them.
Yeah, somebody's coming in. And
somebody's coming in for some advice.
Yeah, or you got somebody in the kingdom, your kingdom, Israel, that's not happy.
Right.
And you're supposed to be presiding. Right.
Like the two women,
yep,
right?
Bingo.
With the baby.
Thank you.
Yep, you got to solve a few problems.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe party it up or something. Yep. You've done a few things today, right?
Yeah, and then
you got no structure.
2:00 in the afternoon, got to take a nap.
Yeah.
Right? 4:00, you're having a dinner, right? If you're from Ohio, right?
Yeah,
that's what
I was
do.
going to say, that's an early dinner.
That's early dinner. If you're in Ohio, they eat at that time. But that's funny. We grew up that way, and that was always funny. Jess and I always laugh about that. We go up to see my mom, God rest her soul, and she always made sure it was very structured when you ate, and you ate a lot.
You sure did.
Yeah, you ate a lot. That's for sure.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, 4:00 dinner time. Yeah. It's like, Mom, I can't eat right now. Oh, you better get something to eat. Then 6:00 was ice cream.
Oh, of course.
And 8:00 was a snack.
Uh-huh.
But in Solomon's life, like I said, when you guys think about that, like we look at his life and figure out what a day like in his life looked like. I mean, that's a lot, going on. And as we know, for Solomon not to have any structure, or he made the structure up as he went. And who knows, what that was. We do know one thing, a lot of it was meaningless, a chasing of the wind. Now that had to be like when I look at Solomon again and I go back, okay, and he builds the temple, and they build the wall, and they do all this construction, around Jerusalem, and they're building this great city. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to look at all of that and not feel like a sense of some type of satisfaction, especially what you were accomplishing for God, not yourself, but like that's what Solomon was called to do. And then suddenly, didn't feel that was worth doing. That had to be a hard place to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like it just, you couldn't be satisfied that God had allowed you to do that. We had community outreach today, and we were talking in community outreach, and everybody gathers before and we pray, we're talking. And I knew we were going to be talking about this tonight, and I got to thinking about when Solomon was called to do the temple, and people traveled, people where they got the stone and where they got the wood and everything, and all these people were brought together, right? And Solomon, if you get a chance to read Solomon's prayer of dedication, it's in chapter 8 of 1 Kings, and it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Pull up 1 Kings. You can use this here if you want. And see if it's chapter. I'm going to give Jess the Bible. She's going to pull it up. I want to make sure I get this right. I think it's 1 Kings chapter 8. We're going to check this for you because I want to encourage you to read this where it's at. And Solomon is talking inside of it. Does it say the prayer dedication?
Yes. It looks like chapter 8, verse 62.
Okay. So that's where it picks it up?
Yes.
What's this right?
Hold on.
No, Solomon's prayer of dedication is in chapter 8.
Verse 22.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was the dedication of the temple.
Yeah, you're fine. And his prayer of dedication is 1 Kings chapter 8, beginning in verse 22?
Yes.
Okay. If you get a chance to read that, I would encourage you to do so because it's absolutely amazing. And then also when you read the prayer dedication, one of the things that this gives you this idea why, for me, I really struggle with Solomon's struggles. He uses his hands in the prayer of dedication. And it's amazing. He puts his hands palms up as he's praying for God's blessing to come upon the temple, right? When he feels he receives that blessing from God, Solomon stands and turns his hands outward to give the blessing to the people. Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is very cool. And you read this prayer dedication and you're like, you've got to be kidding me. Solomon, it's just unbelievable, the gratitude. You go back to his dad, David. And David comes in at the altar of God, and you see this in the books of Samuel. And David is before God inside the altar. And his words are, "Who am I, O God, that you would think of me, a mere man?" And you see the same, beauty, that emotion inside of Solomon, right? And then suddenly, Solomon's just they get the temple built, they get all this done, and then he wanders off. It's that to me has been something that I have studied for years, trying to figure out what happened to make that. He was gifted so much by God and trusted so much by God. Again, over at Community Outreach today, talking about right now in our church's life, in Crossroads life, all of us. This isn't just about the people in Community Outreach, okay? We have literally stood up and filled a gap for our county. Literally. Okay, in helping our county right now and helping people recover from Hurricane Milton. We've been put together, right, to do that. FEMA showed up tonight. Okay, I'm over there. It was kind of hilarious how this worked, right? 2 ladies come strolling in. I didn't even know the front door was unlocked. The front door was unlocked. 2 of these ladies stroll in. We start talking. I don't know who they are. They're the kindest people. They're from FEMA. They're over here to talk to us a little bit, make sure we're doing okay, right? Okay. Then discover that we're the church that's helping the county.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so we can be humbled by that, right, and be grateful for that, or we can let it go to our heads. We better be humble and grateful. That's a point I'm making, all of us, okay? Solomon evidently wasn't. Like, in somehow being allowed by God. I mean, David begged God. Solomon's dad begged God. David begged God to build the temple. He literally, he even went out. David went out and got all the stuff to build the temple. And what God tell him? Nope. David, you're a warrior. I didn't hire you to be a carpenter. And not a contractor, right? You're not a construction expert. Okay, your job was to be a warrior. Okay, there's blood on your hands. You can't build the temple. And he gave that privilege to Solomon. God gave that privilege to Solomon. Like, two things here. First is, just think about this. With Solomon's like, this is why this is confusing to me, okay? Solomon fulfilled the dream of his own dad. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that we see. And the second thing was he fulfilled God's will. I couldn't understand why you would not take a sense of like humbleness and gratefulness with you doing that. Right?
He just let the world get to him, it seems, right?
I'm like I said, I mean, you think about, okay, as a son, the daughter, doesn't matter, you know, you want to honor your parents or whatever the case may be. There's that opportunity right in front of you. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then suddenly, you know, who knows how little of time went down the road, and Solomon just kind of like seems to forget both his dad and God. And that's just befuddling to me. The influence, we know in Scripture, we've talked about it, it's the influence of the foreign wives. No disrespect to the foreign wives, but that's what happened, and it seemed to take him away. So one of the things we're going to talk about on Sunday, kind of giving you a little bit of a preview, we think about this, is the emotion of a book called Song of Songs. Now, I'm gonna warn everybody in advance, okay? It's a love story, all right? And it's beautiful. Oh my, it's beautiful. It is. It's beautiful. But it's a love story. And a lot of times pastors won't preach on it because some pastors have, you know, they think it's R-rated or whatever the case may be. And it's not. It's just about true love. And it's about learning that part of your relationship and keeping that part of your relationship of love alive. And love, as we know, is Bev and I, my wife and I, we talked about it in our marriage classes that we were doing, that we do here online, and we talked about that. And it's just something that it's so easy in the world in which we live to forget why you fell in love, because you can let the world just wear you out, you know. And that's, I think, what happened with Solomon. He just let the world wear him out, you know. And that's something we're going to be talking a little bit on Sunday. Now, I will say that when we do Song of Songs on Sunday, there's a lot of practical application, believe it or not, in Song of Songs. And many people don't take the time to read it, to learn it. So there's a lot of practical application, not just for being married, but about yourself and caring about yourself and caring about your family and the people around you and taking better care of yourself. You know, I want to kind of wrap this up tonight because I want to make sure first. Get any more points you want to make?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
So you know how you said Solomon asked God to give him wisdom?
Yeah.
Do you think if he would have just asked for help from God, he would have easily gotten it, right? Like, instead of trying to feel, you know, you don't feel bitter out of nowhere. You don't get mad out of nowhere. If he had just asked for help, you think God would have made him feel better? I feel like definitely he would have if he had just asked again with a good heart.
I think that I think God does that with all of us.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Let's think about something, okay? a lot of times in our life, okay, we think about this. We kind of like almost forget about God. Like we almost forget about God. Like, and then something goes wrong, right? And then like we're mad at God, like because something went wrong, right?
Right.
Okay. Some people take that as, well, I'm going to let God know I'm really mad, right? And God's like, hey, good to hear from you, right? Like, and then some people are like, oops, you're right. God, David is a prime example of that, right? We saw that in the Psalms. That's not anything new. David did it, right? Some people in those situations just use as an excuse to ignore God more, right? Mm-hmm. Like they tried to get away from God, so to speak, and then this happened, and now they use it as, that's why I don't believe.
Right.
Meet Mr. Solomon. Right? Solomon had gotten to a point to where, like, I do it myself, correct? And, like, I don't want to really be bothered with God. How do we know that? We know that because of the fact that Solomon had all the wives, and the reason he had all the wives, and we've told that in Scripture, he was led away to their beliefs. He found the beauty of the women, okay, more beautiful than his relationship with God. Hence, we get the Song of Songs.
Only one time, though.
Yep. One time. Not 700.
Right.
One time. But what we would see inside of that is the writing of Song of Songs. It actually, to me, when I read it, it's like Solomon is trying to fill a void. Whatever that void may be is the fact, whatever that void Solomon felt, and that's the wording I wanted to use, whatever that void was that Solomon felt could have been filled if he would have said, hey, I think I messed up here. But he didn't. And he kept pulling further and further away from God. And I believe he did that by choice. And it was, honestly, we could say it was temptation. We could say all we wanted. But I just believe that some people do this. They make a conscious choice to not follow God. All right, now, being very careful, but moving forward. Atheists. Okay. Why are they atheists? Which never made, I'm going to try to expound on my thought, okay? Is it agnostics that they just don't believe in religion, right? But atheists don't believe in God, correct? Okay. Agnostics, I'm not sure. Somebody maybe can help me with that.
I can't remember.
Okay, it's okay. But agnostics kind of like, it's a certain religion or whatever it may be. They just don't, okay? Atheists, on the other hand, don't believe in God. Okay. If we think about this real hard, okay, if you don't believe in God, why do you have to tell people that you don't believe in God? Right?
Right.
Why are you trying to prove that you don't believe in God? That's your choice. Okay, that doesn't mean that you have to go around and try to convince everybody else that they shouldn't believe in God, right? The problem that I have inside of all of this is like when we read Ecclesiastes, it almost appears to me as like Solomon is writing in such a way that he's trying to move people away from God. Like, I have already done that, right? It's a chasing of the wind. Don't do that, right? And like he's got this, I had everything, right? And God allowed that, that fool down the road, right? And it's just like that's what Solomon's writing about. That's where I struggle with like Solomon inside of this. And I'm not trying to make fun of Solomon. I'm trying to learn from Solomon. It's easy, like in these, we could get people in these comments, going off about what I'm saying. It's not meant like that. Like, I don't want to experience what Solomon did and believe that, I'm so prideful I could fix it. And then get to the very end of my life, okay, almost like God's a fire insurance policy, right? And I don't want that relationship. I want to have a relationship with God through my whole life. I do. So that's kind of what like I see with Solomon. Like, and again, going back to the atheists and the agnostics and whatever it may be, and I don't want to be disrespectful to them, but it's always amazed me, like, if you don't believe something exists, then that's your choice to believe that, okay? But we believe God exists, and we believe that Christ resurrected, And we want to share that with people because we have a testimony of what he's done in our lives, okay? And so that's important to me. That's important to me. And I'm not arguing with, fighting with people about that, but that's important to me. And I want other people to have that. One of the most important things that I think that I've learned as being a Christian, and it's kind of weird how this works, okay, is learning to trust God, okay, and then kind of getting the chuckle when God just kind of appears tonight, okay? I got a phone call that there was going to be food delivered to the church. I called Daniel, okay, our worship pastor, and I said, hey, can you look out, because I was at the house. I said, can you look out? There's a food delivery. He's like, yeah, man, I can check on it. So I come over. He's over here putting the food in, and I said, hey, I got this now. And he's like, okay, cool. He's going to go down to youth and work with the youth. Okay, why is the front door of community outreach open? Like, I didn't go in the front door, right? I wasn't in that way. I came in the side door, right? And the front door's unlocked, and the sign says open. And I say close, and these two ladies walk in, and it's FEMA. Like, okay, like, and then they're finding out we're the church that's helping, right? And now they want to help, and then they want to give us guidance on how we can do, we can get help for the church. Now, I ain't that smart. I couldn't have figured that out for my life, right? But it just made me chuckle, like, oh, so this is how God works, right? That's kind of what like, for me, that's kind of how I enjoy, like, my Christianity, so to speak. It's like, just God likes this little discoveries as you go. That's just me, and that, for me, I wouldn't want to block that out. Like, I wouldn't want to take credit for that or try to figure out, oh, that's just a coincidence. This was there's some physics law or something that made that happen. I you know what I mean? I don't see that. So that's just me. All right. Anything else?
No, that's it.
We good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We hope you all enjoyed tonight. A little different. Yeah. We're going to try to do this more. And again, for all of you that are studying and that have joined us, I'm going to steal Jessica's thunder for just a minute. Don't worry about reading all the books. And if you haven't read them, it's okay. We're glad that you're with us. Really are. And we're hoping that you enjoy, tonight and these studies. Now we're going to do, Jess and I'm going to do it. Okay. We're going to do what the YouTube people do, right? What do they call those? Creators, influencers,
yeah.
Content creators.
Content.
Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button. Yeah, you
better like and subscribe, everyone.
You got to like and subscribe. Yeah, we got to get those viewer counts up. Last time I checked, we were at 225 subscriptions.
That's pretty darn good.
I don't think that's bad at all. That's pretty impressive. I thought that was pretty funny. We're pushing for 480 million.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair, too. I mean, I think, we may not get there, but I mean, 480 million, I'm just saying. We're kidding, of course. But anyhow, thanks for joining us tonight. Hope to see you on Sunday. Don't forget, we're going to be in Song of Songs, and that's where we're going to be inside of that. And these books of poetry have been unique, to say the least, and Song of Songs is going to be no different. That's for sure. It's going to be unique. All right, so let's go ahead and pray. God, we thank you again for tonight. We thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the gift of life. Let us never take that for granted. God, thank you for just being here with me tonight and these discussions that we can talk about and just kind of try to figure this, the words that you put in front of us through Scripture, the purpose, the writings, why, all those things. And thank you for that opportunity, God. Thank you for being a God that loves us so much that you would send your Son, that he would give us life, that we could have eternity with you, and we are grateful for that. Again, thank you for all that you do. Help us to be your church and to share your words of wisdom and your testimony and your love. And we pray these things in the most beautiful name, the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. Hey, you all have a great night. I bopped myself. I didn't mean to. It's a new microphone stand. I told you I'm trying to get used to that. You guys have a great night. We're looking forward to Sunday, and we hope you have a great week. And again, just thank you for being a part of our family. We'll see you all later. Take care, everybody.
Bye.